Welcome to the ACS Technical Advisory Board podcast series, where we talk all things tech including data, cyber, AI, blockchain, and Internet of Things. Meet your host, Dr. David Cook, Vice President of the Australian Computer Society's Technical Boards. David is a technology advocate dedicated to advances and progression of computing and human-computer interaction. In today's episode, David will be talking with Tim Scott. Tim is an active member of the Data Sharing Technical Committee for the ACS. Tim is heavily involved in the privacy-enhancing technology practice at Deloitte. He helps clients to navigate the intersection between data, collaboration, data science, and privacy. Join David and Tim as they discuss data sovereignty, the preservation of data privacy, the future of cookies, and homomorphic encryption.
Tim Scott is an active member of the Data Sharing Technical Committee for the Australian Computer Society. He is heavily involved in the privacy-enhancing technology practice within the Deloitte Risk Advisory and cyber. He helps clients to navigate the intersection between data collaboration, data science, and privacy. And he specialises in homomorphic encryption, secure multi-party computation, synthetic data, and zero-knowledge proof. And he's passionate about privacy-enhancing technologies, or as we like to call them, PETs. Tim Scott, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Let's start with a sovereignty issue. Data sovereignty, it's a difficult issue. It's been hard for governments. It continues to dominate the way in which information is gathered in terms of IoTs, how it's stored in databases and on cloud environments. What are some of the evolving solutions for data sovereignty?
Jordan, I think for organisations based in Australia, we are becoming ever increasingly, and more so than ever before, international organisations. And we have companies that are deploying and using information in regions that have changed the nature in which that they need. Australian organisations face a ever-increasing privacy regime changes globally, but also in our own backyard. We see this in Singapore, we see this in Indonesia. So the desire for information to reside in those individual jurisdictions has become ever more important. And we see this in places like China, the US looking to change their regulations. And Australian organisations need to comply with those. Now, what we're seeing is a really interesting dynamic of a change in technology capability coming to the forefront to address that change. The US and the UK have actually been running a privacy-enhancing technology challenge that looks at addressing cross-jurisdictional data sharing using privacy-enhancing technology. How can we be in a position where we can have the data of a US citizen and a UK citizen reside in those two different jurisdictions, but allow an organisation like an Australian company to query that data, get the results that they need, but not breach any of these critical requirements. And so that ever-increasing need of technology meeting regulatory demands has increased exponentially lately.
Just taking that a step further, do you think that there's the need for, let's say, the unnecessary storing of some information? Is there something where we can kind of cut across some of this for some of the way in which we gather information? Do you think, for example, I look at somewhere like John Deere tractors that suck up data all the time, throw it up into a cloud, not in Australia, in America, that feeds information to stockbrokers in Wall Street who make then financial decisions about the value of the Australian wheat harvest. And that's a real issue from a sovereignty perspective. We want to be all over that, but it happens every day. Is there any way we can shortcut that?
A lot of what we're starting to see is regulators actually coming in to give guidance and direction on what you should do. And a lot of that comes into deploying these new types of capabilities, one being homomorphic encryption. And so what the bloody hell is homomorphic encryption is a common question that we get. You think about data is encrypted at rest and in transit, but to your exact point, anytime where we wanted to analyze that data, wherever it sits, we've had to decrypt it, which means people have access to and are analyzing information that they probably shouldn't be allowed to see. Homomorphic encryption changes that dynamic. We now have this capability to query data while it remains encrypted and it remains in situ. And that's a very, very different dynamic than we've ever had before. The other change that we see is not only where the data sits, but we've also got this capability to encrypt the query that we're making. And so that can be circumstances where you might want I am an investment firm in New York, and I do want to query third-party databases around the world, but I don't want to divulge what I'm looking for or exactly what I'm trying to find out. we can encrypt that. We can actually encrypt that query, send that to the data where it resides, query on the data, and return back only the result that we need without divulging that. And we see that a lot in the intelligence community, in policing, in cross-jurisdictional data sharing, and financial crime is a massive part of where that's starting to play.
Yeah, so we really do have an issue in terms of the preservation of privacy, that some things are just so tempting. They're just so delicious that people just can't help themselves. And so that's likely to continue to be the case. People are going to say, I really like what I can access.
I always hate and people sort of coin it, that data is the new uranium. It holds so much value, but it's so dangerous to touch. And I think we have all these different techniques now out there that enable you to protect the data, keep the sovereignty of the data, keep the privacy of that individual's data that you've collected their own, but still generate value from it. And at the end of the day, that value might be new services that actually have a benefit to our society, that medical research is a critical part of where we start to see this starting to play out. So that, I think that juxtaposition of I need to provide my data to generate a benefit from it, but I have to relieve my privacy, or I have to relieve some level of security of that data. That's changed, and I hope we never go back to where we've been.
Let's switch on to another topic: the future of cookies. Now, is there some space for a revision in this space, and does it involve privacy-enhancing technologies?
As long as it's not choc chip, I'm fine. Joe, Google's been talking about the deprecation of cookies for a long period of time now, and I think there's so much evidence around there that with Apple deprecating cookies out of Safari years ago, we're starting to see that organizations like Google, like Meta, like Firefox are taking in that consideration of what is people's privacy. And so Google's been very public around their deprecation of cookies out there. And we've started to see them using these privacy enhancing technologies as a brand new way of allowing organizations to still have a monetary value for the way in which they operate with their clients, but in a way that absolutely preserves privacy. And the privacy sandbox from Google is a big one. Meta and Firefox's approach with their IPA, another example of where they're using these new techniques to deliver the same level of service that we as consumers have come to expect, but in a different way, where the onus and protection of our data is ours alone. And that's, I think that's a great area to be in.
Tim Scott, thank you for joining the podcast.
To find out more about how the ACS is powering Australia's technology brilliance, visit us at our website, Facebook or LinkedIn. Want to get involved with the ACS technical boards? Email us at tab@acs.org.au and tell us a bit about yourself. Join us for more thought leadership, ideas, and information through our other podcasts on the ACS YouTube, Facebook, or on LinkedIn.